Welcome in the latest episode of that SEC podcast. I'm your host, Michael Bratton. I go by SEC Mike on Twitter, and I'm flying solo for this episode. But don't worry, got a terrific guest lined up. We got Ben McKee of the Swain event and Volquest.com. He's going to hop on the line here, talk a little Tennessee Vols football. But hey, we got a lot of news to get to around the league, and before we get to that, I just want to say, I really appreciate all the support that we've received since going to the video format. It has been a struggle, believe me. And I'm not talking about my face here, even though I went to the Nashville Grand Prix over the weekend, and I picked a hell of a time to get toasted like a lobster here. I mean, I'm sweating under these lights. I just turned them on. So, yeah, it's a hot one in here, and the sunburn's not helping, but I am appreciative of each and every one of you that have been giving us positive buzz about the YouTube. Though that channel's been blowing up. So again, if you're just listening to the pod, we're on video now and uploading them segment by segment. I was up till about 1 a.m. editing the long version of the podcast. I don't think I'm going to be doing that anymore, to be honest with you. Just going to be sending out clips, video clips, that is, on the YouTube channel until I learned how to do video editing. So I'm excited about all that. I really appreciate all the support we've received. And like I said, hey, I've quit my job. So this is my job now, and 100% focused on the podcast. If you haven't already, check out our website, thatsecpodcast.com. That's going to become a big thing this season with us as I figure out how to manage that as well on top of all this other stuff we've been doing. But hey, if you haven't by now, give us that 5-star written review. Subscribe to us also on YouTube. That'll be a great way to keep this show going. Otherwise, we're not going to make it. But enough about me. Hey, let's get into the action here. Let's kick it around the league.
Now let's go around the league.
My daughters said something about me wearing a visor and need to put on a hat because I'm getting bald. So I'm going to wear a hat from here on out.
I mean, if you look over the next 6 years, I think we played Miami 3 times, Florida State 6 times, South Florida 3 times, Mississippi State once. So who's the SEC teams? I think it's an injustice for the kids. We should mix those games up, and you should, play more teams from the West.
Why don't you start calling around and see if you can get somebody else to play us, and we'll play them. We'll play anybody you can get to play us.
In Louisiana, hold on a second. Hey guys! Hey! I'm having a press conference, okay? Thank you.
Let's start here in Vanderbilt, where we don't have an update from the team, but I thought the Commodore fans would appreciate this, and hell, maybe even the rest of the SEC, because the Commodores got upgrades to their uniforms, and they're looking pretty good. So let's kick it over to the promotional video that Vanderbilt released here on Monday. Hey, so how about that? If you're watching on YouTube, you can actually see what we're talking about here. If not, you're missing out. We'll tweet it out for those of you that maybe are not on the YouTube just yet. But pretty nice uniforms, Clark Lee area. The Clark Lee era seems to be going off pretty well here, where they're getting style. They're playing up Nashville. They're playing up being a Commodore. And I think these uniforms are a great start with training camp there in Nashville now underway. All right, but the big news. This actually broke when we were recording last episode, so we didn't get a chance to talk about it till now. Let's kick it on down to Athens, where special teams coordinator Scott Cochran, well known for being the Alabama strength coach, after one season there, they're not saying he's off the team. He's just away from the team. Not a lot of details on what exactly is going on there. I believe the first person to report that news was Seth Emerson of The Athletic, so let's give him credit for breaking that news. No really news otherwise than that. Kirby Smart has confirmed that has happened. Scott Cochran stepped away for health reasons is what they've cited. And in the place of Scott Cochran not being with Georgia during camp, they've elevated Will Muschamp to that, I guess, technically a special teams coordinator role, whatever you call it. But, certainly he's going to be heavily focused on helping Kirby Smart and Dan Lanning on that defensive side of the ball. Much was made of that Will Muschamp hire in Athens when he came down to Georgia. So here you go. You're already starting to see it. I mean, one assistant, for whatever reason, not available there in Athens. And who do they go to? A two-time SEC head coach, multiple-time coordinator, at least one national championship as a coordinator, maybe two. I think maybe just one for Will Muschamp. But hell, that's a hell of an 11th man to call up into the Georgia coaching staff. And yet again, that proves why Kirby Smart and Georgia, they really landed a good one there in Muschamp. You literally could not do much better as an analyst than Will Muschamp, and now he's on the full-time staff. We'll see how long that holds, because I would imagine Scott Cochran, if he comes back, and given the nature of this, given the timing of it, that certainly is not a certainty. I would think Will Muschamp would go back to his analyst role if that happens, but hey, who knows? He may be a full-timer for the rest of the season. And one other thing here for Georgia, starting center Warren Erickson expected to miss a few weeks of practice with a hand injury. Now, the offensive line, I've been hyping up Georgia all off season. The offensive line is, I don't want to call it an issue. That may be too strong of a word, but because they have massive talent. They got Matt Luke, who we all knows what he's doing when it comes to offensive line coaching, but that is a concern there. The offensive line, that could be basically the only position group I see that holds Georgia back this offseason. Now a key piece, starting center. Got that rapport with JT Daniels out of the lineup. Hopefully he'll be back in time for Clemson, but he better be, because that's all I hear every time I hear people talking about Clemson is this defensive line they got. And with that being somewhat of a question mark there in Athens, they're going to be tested right out the gate. Multiple first-rounders. People are saying, of course, it's funny how there's 80 and 90 first-rounders every offseason. People are suggesting, and then the draft rolls around. It doesn't quite pan out that way. But nonetheless, loaded defensive line here for Clemson. So we'll have to see how Georgia's offensive line stacks up with potentially their starting center not in the lineup there in the season opener in Charlotte. More bad news here. Let's kick it on down to Fayetteville real quick, where offensive lineman Ricky Stromberg, another center here, he's injured himself, according to Tom Murphy of the Arkansas Democratic Gazette. Good news is, though, not a torn ligament, according to Murphy. Timeline for Ricky Stromberg's return uncertain at this time, but that's another one, man, where you got to have confidence in Sam Pittman and company to get that offensive line in shape, get them ready for the season, but they've lost their offensive line coach. Brad Davis, of course, off to LSU. They promoted the tight ends coach, shifted him over to offensive line. So I'm not saying that there's an issue with the offensive line coaching. Certainly not the case with Sam Pittman running the ship there, but that is another unit that, I think, some games held Arkansas back last year. The offensive line was not up to Sam Pittman's standard. Of course, that's an incredibly high standard, so I'm not saying they don't have talent or anything, but I don't even think the bodies matched exactly what Sam Pittman was wanting, and that's something that has changed this offseason according to all indications out of Fayetteville. So Arkansas is returning, I think, their top 9 offensive linemen. So this is a deep unit, but missing Ricky Stromberg would be a blow if he's out for any significant portion. Let's hope at the very latest get him back by that Texas game week 2. You're going to need to be at full capacity when the Longhorns come to town. So as soon as there's an update on Ricky Stromberg, we'll provide it. But that's the latest news there out of Fayetteville. All right, next let's kick it on down to Columbia, where some interesting stuff here to come out of South Carolina as, of course, Kevin Harris, they've been saying not a big deal, minor back procedure this offseason. He's not yet practicing with the team. What does that mean for MarShawn Lloyd? I mean, a guy we all wanted to see last season. Unfortunately, didn't happen due to the injury. But these are some really good comments here from MarShawn Lloyd on Monday about stepping up, trying to fill in. But I love the fact that, every time I've heard this guy speak, you would never know he's a 5-star, one of the top running back prospects in the nation, got all this praise and adulation and all expectations, but it's not that he doesn't have expectations, but he just seems like a very humble guy. And while it sounds like he'll have an increased workload, especially right out the gate here in the season with Kevin Harris potentially limited, which may not, in fairness, may not be the case. Shane Beamer says all indications Kevin Harris will be good to go week 1. But, I mean, how many times have we heard a guy's going to be good to go and then he's limited out the gate? So certainly something to think about. And the way they're talking about it, sounds like MarShawn Lloyd's going to have an increased workload. But while that's being thrown around, he's out not praising himself. He's praising Kevin Harris.
Time for me to step up. Kevin Harris was the leading rusher in the SEC, and you can't beat that. So I feel like it's a time for me to step up. It's a time for all of us. Zaquandre, Rashad Amos, Juju McDowell. It's time for us to step up. I wouldn't say just go ahead and take his spot, because that's not how that works. This guy was the leading SEC rusher for a reason. So we're definitely we're uplifting him at this time, but it's all we're all going to compete for sure.
All right, so I just thought South Carolina fans would really appreciate those comments from MarShawn Lloyd, and then I'm sure if you like those, you're going to love these, because Michael Vick, former Virginia Tech legend, of course, NFL Falcon, Philadelphia Eagle quarterback, his connection there to Shane Beamer during their time, obviously strong connections there with Frank Beamer at Virginia Tech. He was in Columbia, spoke to the team, and I thought this was a really powerful message. I know some people never forgive Michael Vick for what he did, and that's kind of part of his message here to the team. And he kind of hits on that during this little speech he gave there in Columbia.
The only person that's going to be able to get you out of it is you. When I threw those 4 interceptions in that game against the Cleveland Browns, week 1, it's a game I'll never forget. The only person that could fix it was me. Grades dropped 1 year in school. The only person that could fix it was me. Did some horrific things. Ended up in prison. I'm sitting there, and the only person who could fix it was me. But I like being in that situation. If I can go back and do it all over again, my life would be sweet. But you don't get second chances. Everybody don't get second chances. I'm very thankful. But it was all about me. I had to look myself in the mirror and say, I got this, I can do this. And once I get myself back on even plane, I'm gonna look at myself in the mirror and say, I got this, I can do this, still. Self-belief, take you a long way, man.
All right, so how great was that? Really powerful message there. And, that's one thing I do love about these fall camp. It's not all about the position battles. A lot of it's about learning and bringing in speakers. I know many coaches do it, but it's different when it's a guy that nearly won the Heisman Trophy, nearly led Virginia Tech to a national championship. We all know the money he made in the NFL, not just the money, but how he excelled at that level on the cover of Madden. I mean, these are the guys you bring in. Your players sit up and listen, because this is a guy that they want to be. This is a guy that they grew up watching. And, if they're not going to listen to Michael Vick, they're probably not going to listen to anybody. So I just thought this was a great clip and a really great interview for Shane Beamer to land there in South Carolina. And it continues to work those Virginia Tech connections, which, hey, that's part of the package when you get Shane Beamer. So all credit to him for making this happen. All right, next let's kick it down to Oxford. Lane Kiffin met with the media for, I believe, the first time since Ole Miss started camp. And interesting news here where, a lot of people saw this coming. I certainly didn't. This time last year I was singing the praises of John Rhys Plumlee. I love watching that guy play. And it certainly sounds like, not official that he's done at quarterback, but the way Kiffin says his focus has moved to receiver. And, it's interesting that Kiffin notes that because he makes a good point. I mean, the guy's never really been a full-time receiver, and if he's splitting time in the quarterback room and a receiver, how much of a chance does that really give him to make an impact at that receiver role? Who knows? Maybe he's the next Elijah Moore, and he'll go to the NFL, playing at that slot position. So let's kick it over to Lane Kiffin, talking about John Rhys Plumlee working with the receivers exclusively to start camp here.
Lane, it looked like this morning John Rhys was taking a lot of reps at the slot, and mostly at the slot, not in a white quarterback jersey. What can you tell us about Kincaid Dent, Luke Altmaier right now? What you're looking for them throughout fall camp to try to fill that number 2 quarterback spot?
Yeah, Kincaid and Luke will be in a really big competition for that spot. Knowing that John at times could go back there, and but the focus is John playing receiver because I don't think he can get really good at that doing both. Having never done it before, so he's basically there, full time for right now, early in camp. See how we can develop him there, and that's really the only fair thing to do to him. If you go back and forth, it's just too hard at this level to get really good at it.
All right, so interesting comments there from Kiffin, and then the other one, we all have heard it all off season, and I've been guilty of it as well. Ole Miss defense was so terrible last year, but a little bit of a corner was turned when Otis Reese got into the lineup. Of course, the transfer from Georgia, who had to sit out nearly the whole damn season for some reason, and it wasn't until he started calling out the NCAA that the wheels got in motion here. That should have never been done, and thanks to the one-time transfer waiver, that we won't have to deal with that anymore. But once Otis Reese got in the lineup, really seemed to help Ole Miss on defense, especially, of course. And then so Kiffin talks about getting Otis Reese for the entire season, having him in training camp, and also on the fact that the secondary liability at times. There's no way to get around that, but they added a lot of good pieces here in the recent signing class, and Kiffin sounds fired up about the depth that they're going to have at that position. And anytime I think of Ole Miss secondary, I hate to bring it up, but I just think of that Auburn game, which refs may have blew that one for them, but at the end of the day, it was on the secondary to make a play there against Seth Williams, and they didn't do it.
Well, that was a long year for him. Obviously we were grateful when it happened, but he went through a lot of ups and downs because it would look like it was close, then it wouldn't happen, and so I was just happy that he stayed with it, did such a great job on service team, but stayed in the game plan, knowing that at any time it could happen. And I'm sure, that was a struggle because it was so late in the season he still wasn't eligible. So he did a good job getting thrown in there, and now he's had a whole off season to really get comfortable and expect a really big season from him. Well, I think it is a good mix of some veteran players that return with a lot of young players. They obviously all won't play this year, but eventually, that's going to be a really deep group as those guys get older. So I think it's a really good mix. We do a lot of multiple things where there's a lot of DBs on the field at the same time. So I think there'll be a lot of opportunity for those guys to play and play a number of different spots.
All right, so Kiffin doesn't get very enthusiastic during these pressers, but that's about as enthusiastic as you're going to hear him talk about defenses. So I just thought Ole Miss fans would appreciate that, and that's what, fingers crossed, that's what they're hoping for. Improve this defense. We're not looking for them to be gangbusters or anything on that side of the ball. Just be capable in SEC play, and Ole Miss is going to surprise a lot of people if that happens. All right, last update, staying in the state of Mississippi. Let's jump on down to Starkville, where Mike Leach move away from the lawnmower, thank goodness. But he provided the latest update on the quarterback competition there, and also on the offensive line, which, I don't think it's tough to talk about offensive line in depth on a podcast like this, but that was, of all the issues that plagued Mississippi State last year, it was the offensive line. I mean, how many times did we see defenses drop 8, rush 3, and 3 were beaten 5 consistently at Mississippi State last year, which is inexcusable, particularly when you got some talent on that offensive line like Charles Cross, who some people think may be one of the highest drafted tackles in the upcoming NFL draft. So certainly didn't showcase that last year, I didn't think. But Mike Leach talks about the offensive line and how that unit is coming together. And according to Coach Leach, pretty much everything's open here.
Yes.
Coach, you brought in a lot of competition in the quarterback room, bringing an incumbent starter back. How do you kind of characterize the quarterback competition? Is everybody chasing Will, or is it an open deal?
I think it's an open deal. I mean, I think it's an open deal. I think Will and Chance are at the top, but it's an open deal.
When do you kind of expect to see one of those guys start to separate themselves, or is it a circumstantial type of deal with that?
It's circumstantial, but we need to push it. We've got quite a few more practices to do it, but there'll come a time where we have to make a decision and split the reps different.
With the offensive line, do you feel like they're pretty established so far with the 5 you want up there, or is that still kind of open to moving around as fall camp rolls on?
I think most of it's open. Most of it's open, and we're slowly becoming a tougher, grittier group, and that needs to happen.
All right, so not much there from Coach Leach. He's not giving away much this camp, but it's interesting. I don't know how much I believe him. We've been firmly in the Will Rogers camp here. I still think that's the way, and particularly when he didn't even say Jack Abram is the one eyeing for number 2 there. So how much is Will Rogers really getting tested? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But I really thought those comments were interesting on the offensive line, because if we got to get this thing going, we know we got, at least I think they got the quarterback in Will Rogers. They've got 2 solid running backs. They've got several receivers that can get it done, and led by Jaden Walley, of course, who may be the breakout candidate in all the SEC this year. They've got the weapons. They've got the pieces. But none of that matters if you don't have an offensive line that can block 3, not to mention 4 or 5, 6 sometimes that's coming at you. So that's going to be critical. That's got to be worked out. And, again, Mike Leach, I don't know how much you take away from his quarterback comments, so maybe I'm reading too much into his offensive line comments, but that's something that I really have my eye on here during camp at Starkville. And last thing from Coach Leach, this was just great. He was asked about the SEC media poll. Bulldogs finished last. I mean, it's almost like a tradition where some people, I guess they just don't follow Mississippi State or don't care. It's just, I think they start at the top right in Alabama. They start at the bottom right Mississippi State and work everything in between. That seems to be the way the media poll goes at Hoover each year. So Mike Leach was asked about that. I thought the classic Leach here.
The SEC preseason media poll came out a couple weeks ago and it predicted you guys to finish last in the SEC West. Do you kind of use that as bulletin board material or with your guys?
I pretty well ignore it. I mean, I don't ask those guys' opinion on anything else, so I'm probably not going to start with that.
He don't give a damn. Don't ask questions like that. So I just thought that was great. Yeah, I thought I had to share that one. But, hey, that's enough spieling from me. Like I said, we've got an interview lined up here with Ben McKee of Volquest and Swain event. This is some really good stuff on the Tennessee fall camp, and I think you guys are really going to appreciate this one. All right, we're pleased to be joined by Ben McKee, co-host and producer of the outstanding Swain event radio show there in Knoxville, and he covers Tennessee for Volquest. He's a must-follow for every Tennessee fan out there at Ben McKee14 on Twitter. Ben, thanks for joining me, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, Mike, I appreciate you having me on. Hope you've been doing well.
I have been, and but not as well as you, my man. You're all over the airwaves. You're all over the beat. So I got to ask, do you have time to anything else on your plate? Is there any chance that you got any eligibility and you could play linebacker for the Vols this year?
I guess I could find maybe a spare year of eligibility somewhere, but I don't know that Tennessee would want me. I'm doing good to paint my new house and put flooring in and deal with that in the midst of fall camp. So I don't know that Brian Jean-Marie wants me playing in his linebacker room.
I gotcha. Well, hey, if anybody's missed it, you got to check out Ben's work over at Volquest. And one of my favorites is that he's put out here recently is just 11 storylines that he'd be watching heading into fall camp. And no surprise, number one on the list, the quarterback. So I got to ask you, Ben, just based on what you've seen, I know it's early in camp, but how are the quarterbacks looking for Tennessee?
They're looking solid. I don't think you can take a definitive stance on anybody just yet. You see the potential in the room, but it still obviously remains a big question mark and will remain a big question mark until somebody takes the bull by the horns and takes the job. Joe Milton is obviously the one that's generated the most headlines throughout fall camp, and that's just because he's so different than the rest. Tennessee sophomore receiver Jimmy Callaway said so himself when he met with the media last week, just speaking to his size and the type of ball that he throws. In the words of Jimmy Callaway, it's just different. And what he means by that is Milton is a guy that's obviously huge in stature, but has an even bigger arm, can throw it up to 80 yards in the air, and throws it with a lot of zip on his passes. So Milton's obviously generated a bunch of headlines this fall camp because of his size and because he is newer than the rest of the bunch. But he's looked solid through the first week or so of camp, and his biggest task right now, in my opinion, is just forming consistency. That's kind of what plagued him while he was at Michigan, just the inconsistency, inaccuracy with his passes. But then if he throws an incomplete pass, then he'll come back and just make an absolute beauty of a throw. So he's a guy that can make all the throws and has looked solid throughout the first week or so of camp. And I would say Hendon Hooker's probably right behind Joe Milton. Hendon Hooker is probably the most consistent of the bunch. At least he is, in my opinion. Not a guy that's going to throw the ball 80 yards in the air like a Joe Milton, but a guy that's just going to be steady Eddie and real solid and just looks real poised, and as he should. I mean, he's the guy in the bunch that's played the most football and done so at a pretty high level over at Virginia Tech in the ACC. And you go turn on the Miami Virginia Tech tape from last year, and you can see him making some really nice plays against a really good Miami defense. So Hooker's looked good as well. I think a week into camp, it's probably between those two, or I should say those two are out front, and I think Harrison Bailey is a little bit behind. Not out of the race by any means, but I do think Bailey is running behind those guys. And Bailey also not struggling, I should say, but working to be consistent along with Joe Milton. Just the ability to process information and the ability to push the ball down the field, but he's looked solid as well. And then I think Brian Maurer is definitely fourth in line there.
Now, what's your confidence level that whichever quarterback it is, that they're going to excel, given Josh Heupel's track record and his offense? Because I think a lot of Tennessee fans, and you can go the last couple of coaching staffs, it didn't seem like the fans have much faith in the coaches to make the right decision under center at many seasons now, I'm thinking here. So what's your confidence level that in the quarterback that they do pick, that they'll make him very productive in this offense?
Yeah, I'm pretty confident. I mean, right now I have no reason not to be. We did assume that Jarrett Garantano was going to take a step forward when Jim Chaney was hired, because Jim Chaney had proven himself to be one of the better offensive coordinators in the SEC and in the country. So we assumed that JG would take a step. Obviously, that never happened. So you obviously take things with a grain of salt when you kind of project with any coach, just because you know that it's not a guaranteed success just because there's somebody new in charge. But to this point in Josh Heupel's coaching career, he's given no reason to think otherwise. Going back to his time at Missouri with Drew Lock, and I know there's a lot of talk amongst UCF fans that UCF took a step back after Scott Frost left to take Nebraska, but you're naturally going to take a step back when you go undefeated the year prior. Mm-hmm. And if you look at a couple of different statistical categories, UCF's offense got better under Josh Heupel, and the quarterbacks were improved under Josh Heupel, Dylan Gabriel, that is. So I'm fairly confident. We'll see. The proof will obviously be in the pudding, but between Joey Halzle, Tennessee's quarterbacks coach, Alex Golesh, the offensive coordinator, and Heupel, I have a hard time that, A, that they would pick the wrong person, and B, that in this quarterback-friendly offense that they're not going to get solid play at minimum. And based off quarterback play the last couple of years, I think solid quarterback play would be a big step in the right direction.
Now, one of the other storylines you said you'd be watching is who will start at left tackle. And I know you met with Glenn Ellerby, the offensive line coach, and a couple of the linemen there. And I know it's early, but any indication on who that could be? Cade Mays, Dane Davis, anyone come to mind as Tennessee's potential starting left tackle?
Not at the moment, and that storyline has become even more interesting since I wrote that piece heading into camp last week. Going into camp, I thought the starter would prove to be Kayron Calvert. Now, his name wasn't written in pen. He was going to have to go out there and earn it, but out of Calvert, Dane Davis, and Jeremiah Crawford, a junior college signee that Tennessee recently brought in, I thought Calvert would prove to be the best out of those three. Calvert's a guy that has the talent and has the potential, but just hasn't been able to stay healthy during his time at Tennessee and has mainly dealt with knee injuries, but had that cleaned up over the offseason and was ready to go. And unfortunately for him, suffered a biceps injury that looks like it's going to keep him out for several months, if not the entire season. So that obviously eliminates Kayron Calvert from the mix. And the reason I say that storyline has become even more interesting is because now it seems like they're trying to work Darnell Wright in at left tackle. I don't know if that's a permanent move, but they're at least mixing and matching and trying to test different options. And Darnell Wright, big five-star tackle coming in college, has primarily played right tackle, but has been getting a lot of work over at left tackle. So that opening has become real interesting because if you can slide Darnell Wright over from right tackle to left tackle, then you likely slide in Cade Mays at right tackle. Then you would have Jerome Carvin at left guard, Cooper Mays at center, and Javonte Spraggins at right guard, and that's likely Tennessee's best five offensive linemen, which is the goal for Glenn Ellerby and Alex Golesh and Josh Heupel, is to get the five best offensive linemen on the field.
Another big question is Tennessee's pass rush. Who do you think will lead this team in sacks and quarterback hurries this year?
Yeah, I think it's going to be Byron Young, the newcomer out of Georgia Military College. He's a guy that was very impressive in the spring, and just a guy that has a great mindset going into the season. I think he's going to surprise a lot of people, and his story is very deserving of success because he's a guy that came from JUCO but did not have any scholarship offers coming out of high school, and saw a flyer just kind of around his school for a junior college football tryout, and he went and tried out for the JUCO team, and he made it. So a really neat storyline that truly epitomizes started from the bottom, as a lot of people like to say, because Byron Young did start from the bottom, and I think he's going to be one of Tennessee's best defenders this year. Again, he had a really, really nice spring when he early enrolled Ede, and I think he'll start on one of the edges opposite of Tyler Barron this fall, and I think he's going to be Tennessee's most consistent, most productive pass rusher.
All right, one of the other storylines you had is who will be Tennessee's number 3 receiver, but of course they know what they're getting in Velus Jones Jr. Jalen Hyatt was at times spectacular last season as a freshman. Who are the early frontrunners, do you think, for Tennessee's number 3 receiver?
Yeah, I think Jimmy Callaway is the first one that comes to mind. He's very impressive, just really smooth out on the football field. I think it'll be Jimmy Callaway or Javonte Payton, the transfer from Mississippi State. I think it'll be one of those two guys. Velus Jones Jr. is definitely going to be the top guy in the room. the most reliable guy. I think Bayless is going to put himself in a position to be drafted. And then Jalen Hyatt has looked really good in camp so far, has a very business-like approach, truly treats every rep, every practice, every day like it's his only opportunity to make it to the NFL. And there's been a real business-like approach for Jalen Hyatt. So I think those two are going to really have big years. And obviously the quarterback position will depend on how big of a year those two have. But if Joe Milton, Hendon Hooker, Harrison Bailey, if they can step up and really be good for Tennessee, then Jalen Hyatt and Velus Jones, I mean, those guys are going to light the world on fire this year. So you're comfortable with your top two guys in the room. And I think Tennessee's fairly comfortable with its number 3 guy as well. I mentioned Jimmy Callaway and Javonte Payton, 2 speedsters, 2 guys that can make plays, and I think that they will make plays this season for Tennessee.
Are there any other players that have stood out to you? Just maybe just caught your eye in camp that you've yet to mention?
The one is Jalen Hyatt. I kind of just talked about him. He's honestly been the one that's been most impressive so far in camp, just because, as I mentioned, the business-like approach. But in terms of somebody that I have not mentioned, I'd go to the defensive side of the ball and mention Warren Burrell. I think everybody thinks of Alontae Taylor as Tennessee's top corner, and I don't think people are wrong for doing that. But I have a feeling, and I think Warren Burrell is really going to push Alontae to be Tennessee's top corner. I think Warren Burrell has been very impressive over the first week or so, and he's a guy that has starting experience and started as a freshman and then lost his job when he got hurt. So he's healthy, and he's looked very good through the first week or so of camp. He's a junior now, and you can tell that he has that classic urgency that most upperclassmen have as they try to round out their career in a positive way and get to the league. So Warren Burrell is a name that I have not mentioned that kind of first comes to mind when you ask me about guys who have stood out.
Now, you shared some comments here from Dane Davis today that went kind of viral of just, the energy there at practice under Josh Heupel completely different. Can you kind of rehash that for the listeners? And is that something that you've seen that, it's not unique to Dane Davis, but maybe the players just having more fun on the practice field?
Absolutely. And Dane Davis was not shy in his comments about the difference in the environment. And he was talking about practice specifically, but it's more than just practice. It's just everyday life in the football facility. It's different. It's night and day different. And all of the players have spoken to that. Not all of them have been as strong in their comments as Dane Davis was today. And I loved how Dane Davis compared it to Monday, how somebody like you and me, we go to work on Monday dreading to go to work. And that's what practice was like every day in the facility was like under the previous coaching staff. And now there's no more Monday. There's no more Mondays. Sorry. No more Mondays. Everything is fun. Everything is a fun day for Tennessee football at the moment. And it's just a polar opposite feeling within the football facility. And several of his teammates have illustrated that throughout the first week or so of camp when they've spoken with the media. But Dane Davis definitely did not hold back and spoke to the last coaching staff and just how they just zapped the energy out of everybody within the facility. And again, so many players have alluded to it. There's no sense of entitlement amongst the best players on the roster. That entitlement is gone. So Dane Davis, very strong in his comments, and all of his teammates have also echoed that throughout the first week or so in camp. But that also goes back to spring. I mean, you heard those same type of comments back in spring practice, and it's not talk. It's genuine. There's a different vibe in the building right now, and we'll see if it translates to wins on the field. But the culture is definitely different under Josh Heupel so far, and that's a huge step in the right direction.
All right, last thing for you, Ben. I really appreciate all the time you've given me, but there's always the diehards that are going to think Tennessee is going to do well no matter what. But I'm seeing quite a bit of negativity. Some fans, maybe as we're getting closer to football, that's going away. But just this offseason, a lot of Tennessee fans not that excited. Can you give us a reason for optimism? throw out a thing or two that makes you think Tennessee can really overachieve this season in the SEC East? And I'm not saying win the division, obviously, but you're seeing some people have them as the 6th best team in the East, which I think is crazy. But can you give us a reason for optimism heading into the season?
Yeah, I think you don't look anywhere else other than the quarterback position. I know nobody's really asserted themselves just yet, but you have somebody other than the previous quarterback playing quarterback. I think that should be all the optimism in the world, and kind of going hand in hand, you have somebody coaching the football team other than the last person who was coaching the football team. So I think just a change in personnel should excite people. And I don't really know what the true definition of Tennessee succeeding this season is for most people. In my mind, it's 6 or 7 wins, and with this schedule, I think it's obtainable. Typically, Tennessee's schedule always seems like it's the toughest in the country, or one of the 5 toughest in the country. You've had to go to Oregon. You've had to open it up against the best West Virginia team in 20 years, it felt like. But this year is much different. You don't have to go to Oklahoma. Oklahoma doesn't come here. You play Pittsburgh week 2, and I'm not chalking that up as a W for Tennessee, but Josh Heupel in year 1 would much rather face Pittsburgh than Butch Jones having to travel to Oregon year 1, or Jeremy Pruitt having to play West Virginia in Charlotte year 1, or Oklahoma in year 2. You would much rather play Pittsburgh at home. So you also don't draw, a really tough second team out of the West. You do play Ole Miss, and that game will be difficult because Lane Kiffin and Matt Corral are going to be able to put up some points. But Ole Miss's defense is still going to be trash. So if Josh Heupel's offensive system is what it seems to be, then you should be able to put up points as well. And that's a home game. You're definitely capable of winning that game is what I'm getting at. So the Pittsburgh game is winnable. Ole Miss game is winnable. And there are several others, South Carolina, Missouri. Kentucky will be challenging, but I think that's a game Tennessee could win. So the fact that there's new leadership, there's a new vibe, I think there's definitely a recipe for overachievement for Tennessee this season.
All right, he's Ben McKee. Catch him every morning with Jason Swain over at the Swain event, and check out all his work at Volquest. Really appreciate you, Ben. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, Mike, really appreciate you having me.
All right, so I just want to say thanks again to Ben McKee for joining the show and dropping some knowledge on Tennessee camp. Tennessee fans are dying to know what's going on up there on Rocky Top with the new coaching staff and the quarterback battle and everything that goes with it. So really good stuff from Ben. You've got to check out his work at Volquest. Got to listen to the Swain event if you're not already. That's not only one of the best shows in Knoxville covering the Vols, but one of the best shows in the entire SEC. So check out the Swain event, which plays every weekday morning there in Knoxville. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this episode. And, I apologize that the interview was not in video format. I mean, you would not believe how long this has taken me to do this stuff. The way I look at it, I'm like one of these players, man. I'm in camp right now. I got to get my ass in shape for the season, and I'm working my tail off. I was up till 1 a.m. last night doing these video edits, so I'm going to keep doing it until I can't do it anymore, and the response has been terrific, so I cannot thank each and every one of you enough. Again, check us out on YouTube, and if you haven't already, give us that 5-star written review on the Apple Podcast app, and share that with us at thatsecpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll send you a beer koozie of your choice just for doing that. But I really do appreciate each and every one of you, all the support, and Cousin Shane, he'll be back on the next one. At least that's the plan. So maybe he'll have his camera hooked up by then. Don't hold your breath, but maybe he will. We'll find out together. But that's going to do it. Catch you on the next one.